We were a very close-knit family. We was good children. We had no knowledge of the history of the house before the happenings.
When we talk about poltergeists, we think about a fear-inducing invisible force with the ability to move objects at will, often banging and knocking on walls, doors, ceilings and floors, sometimes all through the night. In the dictionary, the definition of poltergeist reads, "Poltergeist is a German word meaning noisy spirit. It refers to a disembodied spirit or supernatural force credited with certain malicious or disturbing phenomena, such as inexplicable noises, sudden wild movements, or breakage of household items." The word translates literally from German as knocking spirit. There have been many reports of poltergeist activity throughout history all over the world, but none have ever quite lived up to the hype and fear of the Enfield Poltergeist. In 1977, a house in the North London suburb of Enfield was the scene of violent disturbances of apparently paranormal origin. The occurrences were similar to those reported in other cases of the poltergeist type: knockings and other noises with no apparent cause, doors opening and closing by themselves, furniture overturned, small objects hurled across rooms, picture frames ripped from walls, small fires that started and went out by themselves, and such like. The events continued for just over a year, and in many cases were witnessed by neighbours, investigators, technicians, press reporters and broadcasters, police officers and others. In its latter stages, the case was notable for the emergence of abusive and often obscene speech from the mouth of a 12-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Is anybody there?
No.
Who's there?
Doctor
Doctor Who?
Goose Chasers here.
Tape recordings were made of the voice, which was gruff and masculine, apparently that of an old man. Maurice Grosse, a successful inventor, initiated an investigation soon after the start of the events on behalf of the Society for Psychical Research. Grosse was soon joined by author and paranormal investigator I. Lyon Playfair, whose 1980 book, This House is Haunted, an investigation of the Enfield Poltergeist, is the main source of information about the events. Detailed and broadly accurate reports published over a period of time by the Daily Mirror led to widespread attention by other newspapers, radio and television. The house is 284 Green Street, a 3-bedroom council-owned semi-detached house dating from the 1920s. At this time, it was occupied by a family consisting of 47-year-old divorcee Peggy Hodgson and her 4 children, Margaret 13, Janet 12, John 11, and Billy 7. Peggy Hodgson was considered by those who knew her to be a pleasant and conscientious person, overcoming financial insecurity to do her best for her children. Margaret was serious and reserved, Janet lively and extrovert. John was only at home during the school holidays and some weekends, since he boarded at a special school. Billy suffered from a severe speech defect, but in other respects was a typical little boy. Mrs. Hodgson's brother, John Burkham, a hospital worker, lived nearby at 272 Green Street with his wife Sylvia and 2 children, Paul and Denise. The 2 families appeared to be close, and John was supportive towards the Hodgsons. The Hodgsons' next-door neighbours were builder Vic Nottingham and his wife Peggy, along with their 20-year-old son Gary. Relations between the families were seen to be friendly and supportive. On the 31st of August 1977, at around 9:30 p.m, the children, Janet and John, heard shuffling in their bedroom. Their mother entered the room, and all three heard knocking sounds. A chest of drawers moved 18 inches across the room without any apparent physical contact. They immediately went to fetch help from the Nottinghams next door. Vic and Gary Nottingham entered and heard further knocks. Vic later stated that he could find no source for the knocks, which seemed to follow him around the house. At this point, Peggy Nottingham called the police. PC Heaps and PC Hyams arrived at around 1 a.m. Heaps witnessed a chair move 3 to 4 feet across the living room floor without any physical contact. There were also further knockings. Over the next few days, marbles and toy building blocks appeared to fly around the house of their own volition, witnessed by members of the family and the Nottinghams. There followed visits by council officials, clergymen and others, but none of these deterred the phenomena, which continued unabated. On 4th of September, Mrs. Nottingham phoned the Daily Mirror in the hope it would put her in touch with someone who could help. Reporter Douglas Bence and photographer Graham Morris visited the house. Both men witnessed flying objects, and the latter was hit on the forehead by a piece of Lego travelling at speed. He insisted that the bruise was still visible for some days later. On 7th of September, senior reporter George Fellows and photographer David Thorpe visited the house. In early September, the Daily Mirror's George Fellows contacted the Society for Psychical Research and spoke to the secretary, Eleanor O'Keefe. O'Keefe got in touch with Maurice Gross, who had recently joined the organisation, and declared his willingness to act as an investigator if any interesting cases should arise. Gross was a successful inventor, responsible among many innovations for the rotating advertising billboard. His interest in paranormal phenomena had been awakened by a series of meaningful coincidences that followed the death of his daughter Janet in August 1976. Of head injuries sustained during a motorcycle accident. Gross visited the house on September the 5th. He advised Mrs. Hodgson to remain calm and recommended she take notes of any incidents. On the 8th of September, Gross and 3 Daily Mirror reporters witnessed a loud crash. Convinced that Hodgson's claims were genuine, Gross decided to take on the case. During subsequent visits, he and others observed marbles that flew through the air and landed on the floor without rolling, doors and drawers that opened of their own accord, door chimes that swung, objects such as teaspoons, cardboard boxes, and a fish tank lid that jumped. The movements were witnessed by Gross, the Hodgsons, Peggy Nottingham's father, and 4 reporters and photographers from the Daily Mirror. At this relatively early stage, as many as 10 people not related to the family had witnessed the phenomena firsthand. Author and investigator Guy Playfair responded to an appeal to the SPR for assistance by Gross and arrived on the 12th of September, along with Rosalind Morris from BBC Radio 4, The World This Weekend. He and Gross worked together for more than a year, making a total of 180 visits and 25 all-night vigils at the house. The incidents at Enfield are among the most closely recorded in any poltergeist-type case. Gross, Playfair, Mrs. Hodgson, and other witnesses kept records of varying levels of detail. Tape recordings, mainly by Playfair and Gross, eventually totalled over 180 hours. An incomplete list is as follows. Marbles and pieces of Lego seen travelling through the air at great speed, seemingly emanating from the walls or windows. A teapot shook vigorously on a cabinet in the absence of any external vibration. Metal spoons bent and the lid of a metal teapot was deformed. The shade of a bedside lamp tilted and then straightened. A toilet door opened and closed when nobody was anywhere near it. Cardboard boxes and cushions were thrown by an unknown force. A slipper was thrown across a room by an unknown source. A framed certificate was pulled off the wall. Gross, apparently, was alone in the room. A bedroom carpet was pulled up at the edge to form an identical shape each time, an effect which Gross was unable to replicate. A settee was levitated and overturned in front of several witnesses. 11-year-old Janet was levitated and deposited in different places at different times. Kitchen unit doors slid open of their own accord. Cubular door chimes swung from side to side many times. Footsteps were heard when nobody was around. 12-year-old Margaret was held fast by an unknown force. Knocks, bangs, and crashes were heard, not caused by plumbing, vibration, or other external sources. Coins disappeared from one room and reappeared in another. Small fires started and extinguished themselves without causing damage. Water appeared in circumstances not understood. Normally reliable electrical equipment, like tape recorders and cameras etc., failed to work. Apparitions were seen, partial and total. The iron frame of a built-in fireplace was wrenched from the wall. Excrement appeared in inappropriate places. There were written messages. The abusive remarks and swear words in a gruff masculine voice apparently produced by Janet, and sometimes Margaret. Some effects occurred simultaneously. Many were repeated at different times and places, both day and night. Some were seen by members of the public who in many cases had no interaction with the Hodgson family. They included John Rainbow, a local tradesman, Richard Gross, a solicitor, and Hazel Short, a road crossing council employee. Short told Playfair that she had been walking towards number 284 to pick up her lollipop sign, which she normally concealed under the hedge at the front of the house. I was standing there looking at the house, when all of a sudden a couple of books came flying across and hit the window. It was so sudden. I heard the noise because it was so quiet. There was no traffic at that time, and it really made me jump. Then, after a while, I saw Janet. I don't know if there's a bed underneath that window, but she was going up and down bodily, as though someone was just tossing her up and down in a horizontal position, like as if someone had got hold of her legs and back and was throwing her up and down. I definitely saw her come up about window height, but I thought if she was bouncing, she'd bounce from her feet. She wouldn't be able to get enough power to bounce off her back to come up that high. My friend could see her as well. We both saw her. WPC Caroline Heaps testified to the investigators as follows.
It came off the floor, or maybe a half inch I should say, and I saw it slide off to the right, about 3.5 to 4 feet before it came to rest. I checked to see whether or not it could possibly have slid along the floor. I placed a marble on the floor to see whether or not the marble would go in the same direction as the chair did, and it didn't roll at all. I checked for wires under the cushion of the chair, and I could find no explanation at all.
George Fallows, the Daily Mirror reporter, gave this account of events that he witnessed. Because of the emotional atmosphere at the house and in the neighbourhood, ranging from hysteria through terror to excitement and tension, it has been difficult to record satisfactory data. Nevertheless, I am satisfied the overall impression of our investigation is reasonably accurate. To the best of our ability, we have eliminated the possibility of total trickery, although we have been able to simulate most of the phenomena. In my opinion, this faking could only be done by an expert. In December 1977, 3 months after the start of the disturbances, an anomalous voice began to emanate from Janet. It started as a series of whistles and dog-like barks, and developed into a human voice, that of an elderly male. Harsh and guttural, and quite unlike Janet's. The voice identified itself as Bill Wilkins and claimed that he had lived in the house. The previous occupant was in fact a Mr. Wilkins who had died in the house, a fact seemingly unknown to Janet. It habitually swore and claimed to still be living and to sleep in Janet's bed. Interrogated by Richard Gross, Maurice Gross's son, a solicitor, the voice gave further details. I went blind, and I had a hemorrhage, and I fell asleep, and I died on a chair in the corner downstairs. To eliminate the possibility that Janet was herself faking the voice, Gross taped up Janet's mouth. The voice continued to be heard, somewhat subdued, as was the case on future occasions when Janet's mouth was also filled with water. Early in January 1978, Margaret started to speak in a similar harsh voice, but without the same intensity or duration as Janet's. Many hours of recordings of the voice were made, the details of which are related in Melvin Willins' The Enfield Poltergeist tapes of 2019. A contact microphone placed on the back of Janet's head picked up what appeared to be a different and louder sound than her normal voice. A speech therapist approached by the investigators was unable to say where the sound was coming from or how it was being sustained. It had some resemblance to a false vocal cord tone. Ray Allen, a ventriloquist, felt that the voice was being produced via the diaphragm, but this was disputed by Gross and Playfair. Gross was so convinced of the paranormal origin of the effect that he offered £500, later £1,000, to a nominated charity if any child could replicate the voice under the terms he specified. Not one person accepted his offer. A variety of other methods of investigation were undertaken by a number of people between August 1977 and October 1978. Physicist John Hasted found that Janet's body increased in weight when she was strapped to a Blundell couch devised to measure such anomalies. He reported 2 sudden 5-second weight increase signals of about 1 kg and a minute gradual weight increase which eventually returns to normal, an anomaly he was unable to explain. He was further intrigued by a light bulb that exploded in an unusual way, finding that one of the glass supports on which the filament was mounted had snapped, an event he considered very rare. Physicist David Robertson carried out experiments at Enfield. He attempted to video Janet secretly, but found it impossible to conceal the equipment from her. He reported a levitation of Janet, the teleportation of a large cushion to the house roof, the overturning of a sideboard, his head being struck by a flying plate, his hair pulled when he slept on the floor of the front room. A local psychiatrist examined the girls and maintained that if they were left alone, then the disturbances would stop. However, this did not prove to be the case. Janet was given a detailed physical and psychological assessment at London's Maudsley Institute of Neuropsychiatry by Dr. Peter Fenwick. No abnormality was discovered, such as damage to the brain or evidence of epilepsy. Hypnosis similarly failed to uncover any evidence of psychological frailty. Playfair undertook some research that found similarities between some manifestations of Tourette's syndrome, including explosive utterances, barking and swearing. When medical doctors were called out, they usually prescribed calming drugs to help Janet sleep. National press reporters, photographers and television crews used different approaches to try to uncover the reasons for the phenomena. Some introduced professional magicians to try to discover fraudulent activity. Others brought spirit mediums to make contact with the haunting entity. Gross and Playfair conceded that Margaret and Janet had sometimes tried to trick them, but insisted these occasions were very few, that they were very quickly discovered, and that the girls had then admitted their deceit. The family and direct neighbours believed the phenomena to be real. Those who knew Peggy Hodgson had no doubts about her personal integrity. This House is Haunted was published in 1980. It was reviewed sceptically by Anita Gregory, a SPR member and investigator who had visited Enfield with John Beloff in December 1977. The pair argued that the girls enjoyed play acting. Gregory alleged that John Burkham told her that Janet taught herself the trick of talking in a deep voice, and that she enjoyed keeping strangers hopping about. Gregory also stated that Peggy Nottingham had told her that what was going on now was pure nonsense, and it was kept going by the investigators. In a later response to Gregory, Gross defended himself against her criticisms and pointed out that she had conceded the case included some good evidence and testimony, being answered in turn by Gregory with more criticisms, including a complaint about the lack of evidential video footage. Towards the end of his life, Gross was much occupied with defending his investigation of the Enfield events, writing articles for a wide range of publications and speaking at conferences. In 1995, he took part in an edition of popular ITV television programme Strange But True with presenter Michael Aspel. Gross appeared in a French documentary The Strange Odyssey in 1995. He was interviewed by a Japanese film company in 1996, at which time Terry Wilkins, son of the former occupant of the Enfield house, and putative entity Bill Wilkins, confirmed that his father had indeed died in the house many years earlier, in the circumstances that Janet's voice had described. Gross died in 2006. Playfair remained an active researcher, author and SPR Council member almost until his death in 2018. He vigorously defended the legitimacy of the investigation and the claims of paranormality. In 2007, he took the Times to task for making unfounded comments about the case. Peggy Hodgson died in 2003. Her older son John died in 1981 at just 14 years of age. Janet left home at 16, married young, and suffered the loss of her own son when he was aged just 18. Asked in a newspaper article in 2011 whether she believes the house was still haunted, Janet said, "Years later, when Mum was alive, there was always a presence there, something watching over you." Janet, who at this time was aged 45, mentioned having been bullied at school as a result of the incidents, being nicknamed Ghost Girl. She also mentioned having played with her Ouija board before the trouble flared up. She said that she had been unaware that she went into trances until she'd been shown the photographs. I knew when the voices were happening, of course. It felt like something was behind me all of the time. They did all sorts of tests, filling my mouth with water and so on, but the voices still came out. The levitation was scary because you didn't know where you were going to land. I remember a curtain being wound around my neck. I was screaming. I thought I was going to die. After the death of Peggy Hodgson, the house was briefly occupied by mother of four Claire Bennett, who stated, "I didn't see anything, but I felt uncomfortable. There was definitely some kind of presence in the house. I always felt like someone was looking at me." Her sons would wake up in the night hearing people talking downstairs. Bennett then found out about the house's history. Suddenly, it all made sense, she said. The family moved out after just 2 months.
And we could hear this shuffling noise near the bedroom door, at the bottom of my beds to the chest of drawers. And the chest of drawers started shuffling and it moved towards the door. And me and my brother Johnny were both sat up and we was really frightened. And Mum came in and put the light on. She said, "What's all this noise about?" And we said, Mum, the chest of drawers is moving." And she see it again, she see it shuffling towards the doorway, and she pushed it back, and then it started to shuffle out again, and she couldn't push it back. There was levitation, there was the voices, and then there was like incidents that happened to me that were like the curtain which wrapped itself around my neck, which was quite life-threatening for me, and it brought it home to me that this could kill you. I feel that it became to use me, maybe because it was drawn off of my energy, maybe. I mean, I often think, why me? To sum it all up, to weigh it up all in one, I was used and abused. When Ed and Lorraine came to the house, to me it felt like some sort of comfort had arrived for the first time. In the respect that they come to try and help us. And it didn't feel like that when anyone else visited. They just seemed to visit to see what was going on and to witness something that was happening. But Ed and Lorraine, you felt warm and comforted, but they were there to try and find out what it was and how they could help you. I know people say, and I don't care what they say, it wasn't them, it was me. I know what happened and I know it was real.